So, there's plenty of as we all know, these visuals really have such a strong impact. So, this is the next part is comes from there's the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. They have this presentation called "Is Manga a Crime?" I thought it'd be particularly interesting for us to kind of go through a little of what they're talking about and how it relates, to libraries and particularly self-censorship, because of some of the, what we're talking about. There's definitely libraries and librarians that are, less willing to, have some of these materials for fear of, some of these legal challenges or big challenges. So, the first part, manga prosecutions have begun. So actually, backing up just a little, um, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund formed in 1986, as a way to organize around the defense of a comic book retailer in Illinois. He was convicted for the sale of obscene materials for selling adult comics to an adult. It was an undercover police officer. Um, and so, these challenges about, what what is what is obscene and what has value, it's still going on, and also, particularly since 2000, people have been prosecuted for possessing manga. So, as we know, Japanese culture has vastly different taboos about sexual content and nudity, leading to misunderstandings and prosecutions of manga in North America. With higher popularity and visibility, prosecutions and challenges are increasing in the US and other countries. As we've discussed, manga culture is, is often part of popular culture in the U.S. And, a generation or more than one generation of North American readers have grown up on manga. And, as they grew up, as they became adults, then their taste in manga has changed, and it's making them increasingly vulnerable to prosecution under American and also Canadian law. Due to the cultural differences regarding the content of manga and problematic applications of obscenity and child pornography laws. So, in in 2000, I'm going to talk briefly about some cases. Um, in Texas, a clerk was convicted for selling obscenity for uh, selling manga to an adult. It was in Dallas, Texas. Jesus Castillo was working at a comic book store and, arrested selling manga. It was labeled not for children. He went into the officer went to the adults only section of the store, um, and the titles were kind of popular horror comics, but they had strong sexual content. And, the prosecutor's case hinged on the perception of comics as a children-only medium, and the assertion that the manga in question was not art, but was obscenity designed to target youth. So, the defense argued that comics are protected free expression under the First Amendment. Um, there was a Asian studies expert testified regarding, cultural merit of manga. No surprise to all of you, as far as the medium status in Japan, and, manga is part of the larger art tradition. Scott McCloud, as we all know him, he went down and testified about the artistic merit of the comics, the specific comics at issue, and, also included the statistics demonstrating, that the majority of comic book readers and graphic novel readers in the U.S. are adults. Um, and, a private investigator testified that, other comics like that are widely available in Texas. The prosecutors did not offer conflicting expert testimony, They just said, we reject the artistic and cultural merit of both comics and these, of comics in general, and these manga in particular. Here's their quote: "I don't care what type of evidence or what type of testimony is out there. Use your rationality. Use your common sense. Comic books, what we think of traditionally, are for kids. This is in a store directly across from elementary school, and it is put in a medium, in a forum to directly appeal to kids. That's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to get this off the shelf." And so the jury went with the prosecution. Castillo was sentenced to jail. Um, he ultimately served probation, but think about um, if in your community adults are arrested for, or the clerk in a comic book store is arrested for, selling comics for adults to an adult, what would the public library, Dallas Public Library, really have to strongly, they'd have to have full support for having kind of an adult comics collection or adult manga collection, at that time, uh, because it's such a high profile, and and they lost at that point, and the argument wasn't made that manga had value. So the Protect Act of 2003 was a anti-child pornography law that expanded prosecuting remedies to punish um, child sex offenses, but unfortunately, it created a new crime: producing, receiving, possessing, or manufacturing obscene child pornography of a non-photographic nature. Um, so, think about what that means. So not real children, or obscene child pornography, not using real children, but as a visual depiction of any kind, including a drawing, cartoon, sculpture, or painting, um, that depicts minor engaging in sexually explicit content and is obscene, um, that lacks serious, and here's where, this becomes problematic. The act says lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And so this act is used to prosecute, manga. Um, the first time that happened, there was a man used the computers. It was at an employment center, but like you could easily put it at a public library. Downloaded two cartoons of children, uh, and but was recharged in the same way as if it were truly child pornography. Um, that's very problematic. We all want to eliminate children being abused and sexually abused, and but images are not real children. Um, it's a hard thing that that's used to to prosecute people. Another case was in 2006. Postal inspectors opened a box of manga from a collector in Iowa. He was followed to his home, and everything. His lifetime work. He was that was his biggest thing. It was Christopher Hanley. Thousands of books and magazines, hundreds of DVDs, and he was a model citizen, no criminal record. Uh, he was disabled. He took care. He had no photographic pornography of any kind. He was purely a collector of manga as a whole and a completist. Um, and 99% of the of manga images he possessed had no fantasy representations of minors at all. Um, but what they did when he was waiting trial, the prosecutors did not distinguish between manga and obscene material. He couldn't view or access any manga. Uh, he couldn't order, any written material. He couldn't use the internet chat, um, which harmed his ability to prepare a defense. He was also forced to undergo mental health counseling. Um, one one better thing, since this was sort of the second high profile, is that the court found that the images must be found obscene to be convicted. But despite this positive development, Hanley, he pled guilty, and um, the court showed that he had no history of criminal behavior, possessed no actual photographic pornography, posed no danger to anyone in the community. The government argued that the mere possession of graphic manga represented a form of sexual deviancy that required imprisonment to be followed by psychological treatment and supervision. Um, and so he was sentenced to prison and supervised release, and he had to forfeit all his materials to the police. So he was convicted for possessing seven adult mangas from Japan, having thousands and thousands. Like, oh my, wow, that's sort of that's it's just it's a scary situation. Um, the other one, there was a 25-year-old American who had, we talked about fan fiction. He had two sort of popular fan parodies, uh, and his laptop was searched at the Canadian border, and he was accused of possessing and importing child pornography, into Canada. He was abused by the authorities. He wasn't informed of the reasons for his detention. He was denied counsel. He couldn't. He couldn't. He was. They didn't let him talk to the American embassy. Um, the police were, treating him like a child pornographer, and he had, two cartoons, two comics on, his whole laptop. He couldn't, waiting trial, he wasn't allowed to use the internet. Um, and so again, Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, the expert testimony about the artistic merit of manga. Um, the material he possessed is protected speech in the U.S., First Amendment rights, and the material is accepted in, Japan. Um, Thankfully, they were able to win, the strong defense, but it also, takes, the legal fees were over $75,000. Um, it's just, it makes it hard to know sort of what the sort of the state of prosecution is going to be, and definitely when these things happen in certain areas, libraries can be very wary of collecting materials that become high profile, and worried that someone might actually get in trouble. Um, so in the U.S., some law enforcement officials really regard manga as a code word for pornography, and so cartoonists and readers are, they're fearing harassment or prosecution for carrying graphic novels or comic books, over the border, and many of them are really innocuous. Academics studying Japanese culture have expressed fear that studying sexually focused manga will make them targets for prosecution. And artists feel vulnerable carrying digital files across the border if their art is sexual in nature. Um, we just have to remember, manga is protected speech, just as, graphic novels and comics. Um, you know, it's, oh, let me pause a minute.